Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. On this episode, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Aaron Jarnagin. Now, Aaron is the strategy lead at Integrity Grove and someone that I've known and respected over the years now since we met at UNI. So, Aaron, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I respect you too, Ryan. I appreciate that intro.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're doing some cool stuff. So there's a lot to dive into here in this episode. Can you do a brief intro kind of on who you are and what you're doing now with Integrity Grove?
Yeah, absolutely. So to take the story back just a little bit, I was a huge nerd in high school. So I got into content creation and marketing by having a YouTube channel during early high school, super late middle school, but mostly high school. And it centered around video game montages, creating clips, editing to music. So I actually enjoyed your previous podcast talking about like syncing music to audio and or the clips and creating fun videos. So that's what I
Dude,
was
you
doing.
got to check out DJ Steve Porter, man. He's the real deal.
Dude, that was nuts. I love that episode. It's cool how the content that he made. So I'll give a plug to, if you haven't heard that episode, the last one that Ryan did with DJ. That one is awesome. But anyways, so got into the content creation game. I loved the metrics side of marketing. So creating content for different platforms. It was all YouTube at that time. Everybody was talking on Skype at that time, just to date it a little bit. Nobody uses Skype anymore. But I loved creating content, seeing what did well, and then trying to replicate what did well. And the idea was growing subscribers. We were part of large teams of people that were doing the same Call of Duty content, video game content generation. Um, I love too in your Stephen Porter podcast, you talked about liking Logic. That's where I first heard of Logic, and his music was used in some of those videos. So just had like a really neat experience in marketing, and that's what ultimately led me to want to pursue marketing. I wasn't successful enough at that, to make money, make that a career. And it's interesting seeing some of those guys from those days that have done that. You think of like Phase, if you've heard of those
Mm.
folks. They're pretty popular. But ended up
Is that
going
like
to,
Nick Merckx? Is that one too?
yeah, he's in there, and
Yeah.
man, that's you're taking me back. Yeah, but that's what ended up leading me to want to study marketing. So I went to UNI, where we were in that same business fraternity. Got a good gig out of college at a nonprofit economic development firm. Kind of got to get. I had a long leash. Was able to try all sorts of different things with marketing. Was running a brand that was to promote our area and draw people to our area, and was given free reign to, if I wanted to try Google advertising, social media content, writing website content, dipping my toes in SEO. One story that my boss always thought was funny was when I was dating my now wife. I wrote an article that was Cedar Valley date ideas, because that was something that folks were searching for, and I was like, I'm going to be the top spot, and it's still up there today, that article. So if you're curious ever, Cedar Valley date ideas, man, it's still there.
What's the number one spot in the Cedar Valley?
Oh man, and what's tough about that article is now it's like 4 years old. I don't work there
Mm.
anymore, so it's like it needs to be updated.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it. I'll actually give a plug to. He's the owner of Pixel Labs. Zach. He owns a place called Grid Lounge, and it's a racing simulator. So like you go in, they have these big screen computers, and they have this whole rig setup that you can like. It's like as real as you can get to
Hmm.
try racing. But it's just interesting, something different if you're looking for a date idea. That one's not on the article, but it should be.
Hmm.
So I'll plug that one. But anyway, so through that experience, and I have more of a traditional marketing experience. Like grew up, went to school, worked in the business world, then worked in an agency a little bit. And then at some point just got the itch to like I'd be really curious to see what this would look like doing it myself. And then around that same time, this happened a couple of years ago, and I think COVID was kind of a big time for everybody, kind of like, what does life mean? What should I be
Right.
doing? And so you start asking some of those questions. And then through that time, especially since COVID, my younger brother, Isaac, he didn't finish school. He started a business. He had a first business as high school, started subsequent businesses, and then through college, actually got some clients, marketing clients, and he set out his own agency as himself. He was making more money than I ever made at my normal job. And so we started talking about, what would it look like if we worked on this together. One thing that's really neat with what we're doing now is I just love our blend of, my traditional background, experience background, and I don't know if this is the best way to sum it up, but he just has like raw talent. Like he's in like the current with the trends and creating content. He's really really good at that, and so we thought it might be a good idea to buddy up, work together, and we could kind of blend our experiences, blend our strengths, and really offer a good product to businesses looking for some marketing support. So that's the
So
the long
so
story.
he's the creative and you're essentially the analytical guy. And you
Correct.
guys teamed up and tried to power something through there. For sure, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and it's neat too. Just to put a cap on that and kind of just to show you an example. We work with a guy out of uh, West Virginia, I think, and he runs an FBA Amazon FBA Discord is his business. So it's folks that want to do flipping for on Amazon products. So either they go to Walmart, find something that's selling cheap, sell it on Amazon, or a whole multitude of places. And so that's super fascinating. And then one little piece of that's interesting is there's people that have businesses in that specific niche that they go into Walmart. They'll find those cheap leads, they call them, so those cheap products that they can flip. And these guys will then create videos of literally just them walking into Walmart. No, they won't put a voiceover on it. They won't put any audio on it. But then what they'll do is they'll sell it to these Discord groups and they'll sell the leads.
Hmm.
So like that's people's full-time businesses. And it's just nuts to have that. And then to contrast it with, we've worked with a large commercial builder in Arkansas. So like just so vastly different. But it's so fascinating and people that I'd never be able to be in touch with if we
Yeah.
weren't doing this. So kind of cool.
Yeah. Here's a funny story before we dive in a little more. So I know a guy who actually works at the tree company or the client that Isaac has.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, how do you know Isaac?" And he actually works at the tree company. So then we started talking about this, and it's just interesting how this all circles back. But
Hmm.
one thing I'm curious about, Integrity Grove. Where does that name come from? I mean, you could have named this a million different things, but why Integrity Grove?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things, so in another element that came out of COVID for me personally, is just how important family is. So like Isaac and I doing this together, my parents just moved closer, which is a super blessing. We have our first kid on the way, coming here real soon. Um, and so the reasoning behind the name is just Isaac and I were talking, we wanted this to really show kind of who we are, what we're about, and allow us to tell that story of like why family and community is so important to us. So first off, integrity, like that's something that we feel is missing from the marketplace today in the marketing world is just true integrity, working hard, doing what you say you're going to do, and then following through. And that was something that our parents instilled in us from a very young age. So we knew that word was crucial and critical to what we wanted to have in our messaging and have on our actual name. We also just like that it's something you lead with, so it could be like Aaron and Isaac marketing or something, but just like that first word's integrity, just like integrity, integrity, integrity. Like it's the message we want to send. It's true to us. But then Grove, we grew up on a dead end street with a lot of trees around. And so being out in the woods, nature is kind of something that's important to us, but also the message of, a grove of trees. I don't know that we might be getting a little bit deep, but like kind of talking about like how trees communicate with each other, work together, trees provide for each other and they grow better in groups. And so we like the messaging of, integrity being doing the right thing, working hard, doing what you say you're going to do, and then Grove, partnering with those around you, growing as a community and helping everybody grow together. So it was all those themes. And I don't know that I quite have the story all perfect and packaged yet, but it's all those themes wound into our experience that we thought that was a really great name and communicated the things we wanted it to communicate. And we liked that it was interesting, so folks would ask, and we'd get to share, why that stuff is important to us. So I appreciate you asking.
And that all makes sense to me. So if there was like one factor that differentiates Integrity Grove from the hundreds of other marketing and content agencies that exist, plus AI, plus freelancers, competitive nature out there, is integrity that number one thing that separates you? Or what would you say is kind of that differentiator?
Yeah, great question. So I think integrity is tough to sell as a differentiator because it's like, oh, like anybody could say that, but I think it's a blend of integrity and then true strategy, that then leads to you actually having integrity in the work that you're doing. So one thing that really grinds my gears, and I know we're not to the Quacks part yet, but like prepackaged stuff, and it's a tough balance of serving somebody in a way that is profitable and makes sense versus actually truly helping them. So one thing that we like to do is whenever we meet with somebody, it's what are your goals, and then very specifically like what does that specifically look like. to you. I just know that there's been some folks that have done marketing work where, you get in, you do your 6 months, at the end of it, you're like, what, like there was some nice posts, the graphics look good, but like, did that help? So for us, it's very quickly at the beginning of our meetings, talking about, okay, what are your specific goals? Okay, you need new leads for your tree service, or you need new leads for your Amazon FBA Discord. Okay, where are you currently getting those folks through? How are you attracting those folks? And then building an actual strategy that says, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, and here's why. That's a big one. I think people don't include that why, and then here's how we're going to know if that's successful. And that then provides that honest and builds that honest experience and builds trust with clients. So that they feel good at the end of the day, we feel good at the end of the day. There's nothing hidden. There's no scammy feeling on either side, and then we also can feel like we do a good job. That's important to us. Is you go to sleep that night and you're like, hey, I did a good job. I helped somebody, and I enjoy that. So to sum that all up, it's the mix of integrity, but more so built on actual strategy, and then providing transparency in the metrics that you're, that you're tracking. So
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And that's one of the inspirations of me actually starting this podcast is honestly, Aaron, I don't know how some of these big agencies go to sleep at night knowing what they're doing just to make money. It really grinds my gears. Again, hence marketing quacks, right? So appreciate you bringing that up. So let's talk about some of the services that you guys offer at Integrity Grove. Now, is this just a purely content marketing agency? Is you full video, social media, content writing? Talk about that a little bit and where you guys specialize in.
yeah, absolutely. So, how I would just quickly describe it is we're a content marketing agency. We help folks, and my passion's more so on the smaller business end. And just to give you an example, our dad here at the beginning of this year, he has about 40 years of experience working in cabinets and countertops. That company sold last year. They moved closer, and he actually started his own business and was looking for just some help getting started. So Isaac and I, just in the spot that we're in, thinking about like what our expenses are, what our hopes are, how we want to help people. Like that's a really great example of he's like, hey, I need a website. I need some content to help me get started. I want to showcase some of my projects that I've done.
What's the
Um,
business's name?
AAI Kitchens. So it's
Okay.
actually kind of cool. It's Adam, Aaron, and Isaac is the acronym. So if you ever need countertops or cabinets, man, I mean that's
I'll look into it after this.
that's the way to go. But that's a really good example. We got him his website. Filled out the Google My Business. We got him some content. We made a nice video to go on his website and that he can use to talk about his products, talk about himself. But really, and that's like one of the best examples of, if it's a smaller business or medium-sized business, maybe they have some marketing materials, maybe they have a website, or even just some mismatched marketing, coming in with kind of a full range of services and being like, all right, now you're consistent. Now you have clear calls to action, that you can track and see how folks are engaging with your content. You're getting leads, you're getting calls. And that's, I think, a small but true differentiator for us too, is especially with what AI provides. you know, there are agencies that are bigger than us that could provide way more stuff that we can. But man, when you start to mix raw talent with some strategy and then bring AI into it, there's no reason why you can't help somebody at the majority of steps and majority of aspects of their marketing. And for some of these small businesses, man, the budgets are tough. The budgets are tight. It always has to make sense for both of us. But I mean, it's just crazy out there. So I think that's a really great example of how we've been able to help him. And then it's just a mix of those services for other folks.
Yeah, that's cool. Are there any other industries that you guys, specialize in or try to go after?
Yeah, we really, and this is more so on Isaac's end with the connections that he has, but we really have enjoyed, I don't know if influencer is the right word, but it's folks that want to kind of build their own brands surrounding a service that they're trying to provide. So, for example, Giles FBA is the FBA guy I'm talking about. So Isaac's helping him with social media content. We got his website all up and snuff, and we got some analytics running for him. But that's one that I'm really interested in. Is you have folks that are wanting to create content to, and we've even had ones reach out that they're mortgage lenders. They're not working at a bank; they're just working out of their own office. But we really like those folks, and the reason we like them is because they're invested. We love when our clients are invested in the work that they're doing. They contribute more, and especially if you can get them to be in the content, that makes it way better if you're featuring the actual people behind the business name. So we love that. But yeah, I'd sum it up and say, yeah, influencers are fun. But then anybody that wants to start their own business, is really going to be a good fit for us. Hopefully that sums that up well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So now I want to talk about, you just started your own thing with your brother here. So what are some advice that you have for anyone that's maybe a marketer working at an agency, working at a big company and has that itch, as you like to say, like, oh, I want to start my own thing. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, this one might be a bit boring and dull, but my what I'm super thankful for is like Isaac and I just we don't have any debt to start this. Which what's one thing that's nice about marketing agencies is really the cost shouldn't be a big barrier to entry. Um, but that was one thing that was really important to us is taking the leap. We got to Darcy and I, my wife, have a kid on the way. So just being smart so that you don't have to go into meetings like fretting like I need this, like I can't function because I think that's when there's the slippery slope of over promising, under delivering, just being weird. So that's one thing that's been really important to us is we really want a firm foundation so that we can start, be true to the work that we want to do, and feel good about what we're doing at the end of the day. So that would be the first thing. The second is just don't be afraid to make content. I think another differentiator for Isaac and I is we walk the walk. It's you're not approaching a marketing agency that's been a marketing agency for 30 years, but none of these folks have built anything. And I don't mean to be mean, but it's just like,
You're right,
like
though. I've been in those agencies.
you hire a plumber and it's like they've never plumbed before. It's like, well, why am I paying you money? Like there should be a track record of success. And that's actually something too in my previous roles that I've really thought is neat is when we're hiring folks and they've just done anything. It's maybe they, especially for creatives, they've built a photography business, or they blog, or they just create content, even if it's just for fun, like on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Um, but yeah, so I think that's just another differentiator for us is walking that walk. But
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk about AI a little bit now, Aaron. So I know, we have our conversations offline about AI and whatnot. So let's talk about, how you guys are leveraging AI at Integrity Grove. I guess what tools are you using? What processes are you using AI for? Explain that a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. So, Chat GPT is the biggest one for us. Just helping, especially on somebody just had a great term, and I can't remember what it was, but especially on the ideation end, on the front end, really showing folks how powerful AI can be with, and especially for the smaller businesses, giving them ideas. So that's a big one that we start with, and include transparently in the conversation about how this tool can be helpful, what you can use it for. So that's really the main one. We use, Gemini for stuff related to Google. So if we're doing like search advertising, that's been really helpful. Creating what's neat about that, and I'm sure you're familiar, is, it actually can reference like current search trends and bring some information into the results that it gives you. Opus
Have you
Clip.
looked at Claude yet? Sorry to interrupt you. Have you
No,
looked at
you're good.
Claude?
And honestly,
Yeah.
man, you're going to have way more of this than I do. Ours, I feel like, is still pretty basic, but we rock the Opus Clip when we're making content. Um, yeah, but then what amazes me is like just how AI has been integrated into all the apps we use. So like we use Notion, to track stuff,
Mm.
and the way that it can summarize information. I've seen some project management tools where, and I'd be curious to see how this would work someday. But basically, it can track what different users are doing. So you could say, hey, like, what did Aaron do today? And rather than asking me or providing a report, it'll just look at the tasks that I worked on, what I did, and then provide like a little summary. So like
So
one thing I
basically,
do.
it could record your screen, and then based on its analysis of the screen recording on what you did for the day, it could then provide those, recommendations. It could provide, hey, you should do this, or hey, you shouldn't do this. I see what you're saying there.
It's so yeah, and I love the transparency of that, and also that you don't have to bother anybody. So I think about, and I don't know how this would work, but it'd be really neat if there was a way to have like the service provider and client relationship somehow documented like that. So something that we do that I think is important is we at least touch base with the client every week, like minimum. That is a non-negotiable. Whether it's just an email or a call, like they need to know we exist and we're working. We want them to know what's going on, never have questions. I mean, have questions, but never questioning what's going on. But I'd be curious, like, could you build a tool within Notion or whatever that would just say, here's the summary of what was done this week, from Integrity Grove, sends that out to the client via email and says, if you have any questions, hit us up. And I think that's where AI is really cool is there's a lot of clerical stuff, ideation, especially at the very beginning, that it just so reduces all that time. And then, on the client end, it reduces the amount of investment that they need to make that stuff happen, which then provides opportunity for Isaac and I. So there's going to be agencies out there that can do, more than we do quantity wise. They can provide more services in a holistic way, but really, like, we just want to help folks, and we can help them in a way that gets the ball rolling, and hopefully gets them to that next spot where maybe a bigger agency is where they need to go. But that's where AI has been helpful for us, is just really getting the ball rolling quickly. We like to work fast, but providing quality work, and that's what AI has done for us so far. And those are the kind of tools that we look for, is how does it really slow or speed up that time to provide or time to deliver on a product.
Yeah, and you mentioned ideation. That's the number one thing I always tell people in AI presentations, consultations that I give them. Like, if you're not going to use these tools, always use AI for ideation. If you don't know the answer, just ask AI. Like, what do you have to lose?
Right.
The other thing I want to talk about is repurposing content with AI. And I'm not talking about just Opus Clip, right? Plug a long form video, you get short form. I'm talking about written content too, where you can plug in a blog post and say, generate 5 social media posts. You can transcribe a YouTube video. You can transcribe this podcast and generate that into social media posts, or
Hmm.
an email newsletter, or ad copy, or whatever the case is. The act of repurposing content using AI, I think, is such a huge use case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love too all the time on like Twitter or X, there's people talking about different AI things. But one of my favorites to that point is, you have your blog post, say it's about banking or whatever, getting a home loan. And you're like, hey, I want to make TikTok content. I want to have a few TikTok ideas from this, but I want it to be relevant to folks in Gen Z or folks between the ages of this and this, that either don't have a home or have an apartment. And you can go so deep on that. Like, make this about folks ages 20 to 25 that love dogs, that live in an apartment, male or female, whatever. And that's amazing what it can spit out, and it keeps in mind all those things. You mentioned a tool earlier, and you didn't say what it was. I forget what the name of it was. It was right as I
Claude?
was. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, look up Claude. They're becoming probably the top competitor to ChatGPT. They're just an LLM owned by a company called Anthropic. They're big at investors, Amazon.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I got it. Is
Yeah,
that
check
how
out
are
Claude.
you?
They just had a big update. 3.5 Sonnet's like their top model, and it's pretty neck and neck with GPT 4.0, which is OpenAI's latest model.
Okay, does it include like the photo? Like,
It does. It can't generate images, though. That's the one
okay.
thing where OpenAI has. And let's talk about that actually right now. I wanted to transition into the content side of AI too. Obviously, we can generate images with DALL-E, Leonardo, Midjourney. There's so many of these AI image generators out there. I think video is the next big thing. And we just saw Gen 3 come out with Runway. I don't know if you're familiar with Runway. They just had a new model called Gen 3 come out, and that's probably the better one yet ever since. And Sora's not even available to the public yet, so I don't know what's going on with Sora. I think that's the big wild card in this whole discussion. But what are your thoughts on just like AI video generation? I guess where do you see that going and impacting what you guys do?
That's a super good question, and one that I feel like I think about a lot because I'm fascinated by so right now, especially content marketing, a lot of it's video. Like, the preference of all these apps is video storytelling, whether it's long form or short form, depends on the app. But one thing I'm so intrigued by with AI video is like its ability to, I mean, first of all, compete with real video, but then also to supplement. Like, for example, there was a client that we had worked with, um, and there was an office space that they wanted us to capture and use in an advertisement. But none of the staff wanted to be in it, which it's just a bummer when you run into that. It's like, what the heck? Like, an empty room, like, that's going to compel people to do anything. But in my mind, I was like, I wonder if AI is going to get to the point where, could we just say, here's a picture of this person. Can you superimpose them sitting in that seat, smiling, waving? Um, or whatever, and using it in that regard. But I've also seen, and what's been intriguing to me is, and this is like, I don't know if you've heard of him before. Chase Reiner is his name. He had some SEO stuff that was good. He's kind of, I don't know, getting a little scammy for me at this point. But just using tools to create content at scale, like what you talked about, blogs and articles, and telling it to, hey, take this blog, turn it into a 10-minute YouTube video. There's voiceover included. It adds graphics to the screen. And people are creating these whole YouTube channels or TikTok channels that are either recounting events, talking about influencers, and you can make thousands of dollars with these views that they're getting. So I think it'll be interesting. The balance of AI video and AI content versus a person taking the time to really build that, and It'll be interesting how that competes moving forward, because there's a ton of opportunity with AI content, and it'll be interesting to see. We could get into deepfakes a little bit and like how crazy that stuff can go. But it'll be interesting how that all stays balanced moving forward. I feel like we're a little out of balance where there is good AI content, but some of it can be a little sketchy with the deepfake stuff.
Yeah.
But
I
especially
com-
with it being an
I
election
completely
year, I think
agree.
it's going to get wild for AI content.
I completely agree. And I look at in the immediate future and I look at things like B-roll video, I look at things like drone footage. I think AI could easily replace those, knowing the index of
Yeah.
YouTube videos with all the drone shots in every popular city across the world. I mean, think about drone videography. I think that's going to be a whole industry that AI could potentially wipe out.
Right. That's fascinating. And actually, I think I heard you talk about that on your past podcast. But just the amount of drone shots. I think, did you say the Eiffel Tower? Was that the one you talked about?
Maybe, I don't know, just any notable landmark. I mean, think about all the YouTube videos that OpenAI or whatever, Google Veo is another model that
Right.
they could potentially scrape and then just make new videos based on text prompts.
Right. So to that point a little bit, and we might have talked about this last time you and I just touched base. And I think it was either that day or the day before, but there was an AI video like of the Pentagon with like an
Oh,
explosion,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it like sent the stock market down 10% or 5% that one day because people thought it was real. It's fascinating, and it's all based on what folks are uploading. A conversation I actually just had with somebody recently was, Adobe is brought in their own AI into all their platforms and is using, or automatically opting folks into, basically any project that they're working on. Adobe has permission to take a look at that, to train their AI model. And so the conversation that we were having was, well, what if you're designing the new John Deere tractor, that's super hush hush, nobody knows about it, and then all of a sudden, if people are in Adobe making something else, need to include a tractor, would that ever be an issue? Because now you have privileged stuff that you feel would be confidential, but now you're giving access to this AI that who knows what's going to happen. So it's just like I said, it's this interesting balance that I feel like is going to be hard to maintain, but there's a ton of opportunity with it too.
Yeah, I have a whole episode where we talk about the ethics of LLMs and AI models because they're already doing that essentially with images. Like, I gave the example in a presentation I just gave. Hey, generate an image of Buzz Lightyear, and it's a spitting image of what appears to be Buzz Lightyear. But then you ask it, is this copyright? Is this Buzz Lightyear? And it says, no, it's based on a real image from Buzz Lightyear. So they're already doing this to some extent with images and text. It's just harder to regulate that through intellectual property.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'll be curious to see if there's legislation at some point. Like if somebody took a video of me saying something and posted it, like who technically owns that? It's my likeness, but it's their content, but AI created it from their prompt and got it from somewhere else. It's
There's
nuts.
a whole Black Mirror episode about that. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't. We don't have Netflix at the moment. I should check that out.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. So let's also talk about now marketing quacks, Aaron. This is the Marketing Quacks podcast after all, and one of my favorite segments to discuss on the show. You mentioned one earlier in the show, but are there any other gimmicks that really make your blood boil in the marketing industry, which is full of smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned?
Yeah. So one that, and it's kind of interesting because it's another balance thing, is just recognizing like the power that we have with the work that we do, like having people's attention on stuff that we do every day, and asking for that attention, and promising folks something when they give us our attention, like kind of the gravity of that kind of hits, like you see, oh wow, 1,000 people read my article. And that's nuts. Like, can you imagine 1,000 people in, just all sitting down in the room that you're in and maybe pulling out a magazine with your article in it? Like that always stuns me a little bit and makes it kind of cool. And so one small thing that I have is just folks that don't recognize that, in their advertising, in their marketing. I tried to find it this morning. I think it's an Ogilvy quote, but I'm not sure on that. So I was kind of bummed when I couldn't find it. But basically, like all of your work, why should it not be your best work? Like, why should you not take the time to do it well, to do it right, especially when it's going to be in front of a lot of people? You're getting paid for it, and so that's something that's important to me. Is we're asking for folks' attention on something we've provided. So why not make it your best work? And so one of the quacks or things that kind of gets me is when you can tell, whether it's like an advertisement that went out there, a piece of content that went out there, that there's something sloppy or just easy, that it's almost like there's a lack of respect for the folks you're trying to be in front of, and that kind of gets me a little bit. And not that I'm any better, I mean, I'm not perfect, but it's just I aspire to do a good job, and I'd hope to do a good job. And it kind of goes back to what Isaac and I built a business on, name wise and hope wise, and how we want to provide stuff to folks. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Most of the people I have on, it's usually something related to clickbait or like email spam. Like those are the common ones for sure. DJ Steve Porter, who I had on in my latest episode, he talked about nostalgia being
that
his
was,
biggest quack. And I've never heard that one before, but
yeah,
he's very right with that, with how brands will obviously like leverage nostalgia because they can't think of any original ideas. And it's like a lazy fallback option. I really liked his input on that.
that was fascinating. And I think that's where then you talked about Logic's quote about like your old stuff. You say it because you know it. I thought
Yeah,
that was cool.
it's your new stuff isn't good as your or I can't remember. It's like an industry rule, but basically the point is that people always say like I miss the old Logic, I miss the old Drake, I miss the old Kendrick, and it's so true. You can apply that to everything, and it's really cool how he summed that up.
Yeah, I that was a fascinating one. I that was a neat podcast to listen to. And then
Yeah.
there's the other
Nostalgia is big
little.
too.
I was just gonna say the other little piece of that is just the missing of strategy. You know, when folks are paying for a product and you just kind of anybody doing it mindlessly. You know, I think about content creation. I mean, you can make graphics and videos all day, but if it's not tied to something or trying to make something better or where you can realize where you're missing something, I just think it's a waste of time and money for everybody.
Yeah, one for me too, Aaron, before we kind of move on here is that, I run a lot of Google Ads accounts. I manage a lot of money in ads. And when I talk to a prospective new client who's had a bad run in with a past agency, I ask them all these questions for onboarding. I'm like, what are your brand guidelines? What are your image? Can I get your pixels? Set up your conversion tracking. It's like almost a hassle to these people where before people would just spin up ads and run. So they're not used to it. And my thinking is I would rather do something 100% right, make sure everything's tracked correctly because that's going to be better for you in the long term. And they get pissed off because it's all this extra work and all these extra emails they have to go back and forth and figure out passwords and pixels. I'm like, come on, guys, do you want to win here or not? It just
Right.
bugs me, to be honest.
Right. And you're just trying to do the right thing, you know, and it's because somebody else skipped all those steps, you know, and made it seem seamless or easy, but then had a terrible relationship with them. And that's why. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So that would be my biggest one is when people just try to skip steps and just get that quick win versus like thinking of the long-term implications that it could have. But Aaron, this has been fun. We chatted about a lot of cool things in this episode. Are there any final notes on advice that you would give people listening? In particular, I guess, maybe again, back to the thing where people are looking to make that jump into working for themselves or just marketing advice in general.
Yeah. So one thing that's just been super helpful to us is just recognizing who your tight knit community is of supporters. You know, the folks that whether it's if you didn't get a deal or something didn't go right or anything, you know, having those folks around you that are really your cheerleaders and encouraging, and also then leveraging those relationships for opportunities. Our working for our dad, that was an easy one. That was a no big deal. You know, getting that going there, but yeah, relying on those folks because when you make the jump, it's scary. You know, going from a guaranteed paycheck to to building different opportunities and kind of having that stuff come in. But that'd be the biggest one for me, and I think that was the biggest revelation out of COVID was like not necessarily like what are we doing all this for, that's kind of grand, but kind of, I mean, like when you look back, and that's kind of an old Gary V thing, but when you're in your 80s or 90s and you're looking back, like did you take all the risks you wanted to take? Did you try all the things you wanted to try? And that kind of hit home for me during that time because we were all locked inside, couldn't go anywhere. So I just, yeah, rely on the people around you, use them for support and encouragement, but also connections when it makes sense, and yeah, work hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we try to be everywhere. That's our that's our goal. But anything related to Integrity Grove, integritygrove.com is our website. We have some more content here coming out. It's been exciting and a little bit tough because our family's growing and it's going to be in the next few weeks here. So my life, I just joked with somebody yesterday that's like I have no idea what's going on right now.
Yeah, I get that, bro. That's like every day seems like it's chaos. But I'll definitely leave a link to your website, give you all those podcast backlinks, and I'll tell people to follow you guys on socials too.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. You've always been a great supporter. I appreciate how we stay in touch and just enjoying good conversation. So I appreciate
Yeah,
it, man.
absolutely, man. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you joining this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. And for everyone listening, be sure to tune in again for the next episode.